Welcome back to class. Now, in the last lesson, I had a thought. How much of the Yu-Gi-Oh terms and slang do the Duel Links player base actually know? So for today's lesson, we're going to be focusing on just that. Welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh Slang 101. Now, before I get into the actual terms and definitions of what we're going to talk about, I feel I should put up a warning. These terms and slangs are not official Yu-Gi-Oh terms. These all come about by the player base over time. This means that some of these you may not agree with, or you may have a different opinion. That's fine to have a difference of opinion. Just don't fight someone over it. Other than that, have fun with the lesson. Now that the warning is out of the way, let's get right into different terms or slangs of Yu-Gi-Oh! Note, I'll not be doing this in any order, seeing how there's a lot of different terms, so I may forget one and talk about it later. With that said, let's get started. So originally I had the idea to do this all in one big video, but after working on this for a while, it became just a mess. So instead, I'm going to split this all up into a couple smaller videos. This first one will be focusing more on real-world terms and or slang. Other than that, nothing is really going to change from one to the next. So without further ado, and sorry for the hold up, let's get into the actual lesson. Anti-meta. This will normally be a term you will hear off and on due to the fact it means a card, deck, or strategy that is focused on countering said meta. Ban and ban list. This becomes a big one when people start talking about certain cards or decks. Ban in this case is focused around a card that has been forbidden, limited, or semi-limited. This happens when a card is put on a ban list, a list of cards that are forbidden, limited, or semi-limited in the game. The reason these cards end up there is normally due to them being too strong for the game at the time and to keep the game from being stale. Konami will hit and or ban these cards so the game is no longer stale. Chase card. This term really doesn't come up too often unless you're talking about a box and what cards are in it. This term is mostly focused on the idea that a certain card in a box is more valuable than the others. So even though you don't want anything else out of that box, you'll go into it for that one card, ergo a chase card. Control. Now this term is focused on a playstyle more than anything else. See, this is a playstyle that controls what an opponent can and cannot do. This means both proactively and reactively. Consistency. This term is used by every Yu-Gi-Oh player, even those that play other TCG games. To sum up what this term means, it's your deck having a higher percentage to work the way it's intended. So a good example of this would be your deck having a high chance to have you open with a certain card in your hand in every duel. That right there is consistency. Degenerate. Now this one is used in a couple different ways. One is your opponent or yourself using a combo and strategy that seems unfair to either one of you. The other is more used for a certain card or cards that people are able to use within their decks that let them auto-win a game. Retrain. This isn't used too often, but it is out there. In basic terms, means that a card that looks the same, has the same effect, and is used in the same way, got a more updated look, and maybe a little bit more powerful, and doing so making the other card no longer usable. Meta. This is a term you will hear all the time, whether it's competitive or just in casual play. The meaning behind this word is focused on what decks and cards are the strongest at the time within the card pool and the current ban list. So if you're focusing on a more competitive side of things, then you will hear this a lot. Powercreep. Pretty simple term. It just means that a card or a series of cards are no longer the best, but instead of being put in a ban list, Konami will release cards that are better instead. Record. This is more of a term that is used for tournaments. If a person is asking for your record, they're asking what your current win-loss ratio is, or your standing. An example of this is like 3 wins and 1 loss, or 3 and 1. Vanilla. This term is used for normal monsters due to them having a vanilla-like color to them, on top of most of them being very plain looking and having absolutely no effect besides a little bit of lore. Scoop. This is normally when a person has surrendered to you. Another version of this is Scoop Phase, as a different phase to the game outside of the main and battle phase. Staple. This is used for cards that are good in almost all of the decks that are in the game. Some good examples of this are cards like Floodgate Trap Hole, Book of Moon, and many more. If someone says a card is a staple, no, it's a card you should look into. Sideboard. A side deck for tournaments. More used for TCG and other games like that, but in Duel Links we just call it the side deck. S&T, S/T, and ST. Shorthand for spell and trap cards, or really nothing else to it. Stacking. Effects that focus on changing a deck or decks mid-game to have a certain card order. Tech or Spice. A card or cards that help and support the deck you're using in some way. A good example is using a tech card that lets you get a monster spell or trap effect to go off when you would normally have to do something else to do so. A lot of the time tech is used over Spice, but it's used from time to time. Tier. This is used in both TCG, OCG, and in Duel Links, and for a good reason. A tier or tier list is a list of decks that are the best in the game at the time. Normally, the list will have decks in the following tiers: Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. After that is everything else that's not as good. Now, every once in a while though, there is a Tier 0. Anything that is in the Tier 0 slot can't be beaten by anything 9 times out of 10 unless the deck has a side deck that specifically targets them. Due to this, it leaves them wide open for other Tier 1 to 3 decks to take them out. What normally happens is that the Tier 0 will win and end up only having trouble versus itself instead. Top. Winning a tournament or topping into a certain part of the tournament. Examples are top 32, top 16, top 8, then its first through 4th place spots. XOF. This is focused on how many copies of a card you should be using in your deck. An example would be saying you should be only running one of these 2 cards in your deck. This term out of everything is used a lot when you're building a deck or talking about what cards you should be using in a deck. Playset. This term comes into play when talking about card counts. You see, in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can only have 3 copies of a card in your deck, or a play set, meaning you're only having those cards in the deck as a 1, 2, or 3 of. So if someone says, I have a play set of that card, you can say you do as well, or say, I only have X of that card. And that's it. Now again, these terms are focusing on real world, whatever that means. Now, I will be working on some others that will go with this one, focusing on other terms and or slang. So look at this one as Terms 101 Part 1 if you want to look at it that way. With that said, I hope this lesson today helped you with some of the confusion you may have had from some sort of conversation you had in the past. With that said, class dismissed.